All right, so we are used to these touchscreen devices where the part of the app, where the part of the app that is showing us the state of the world or the state of the app is also the part that you touch to express your intentions. This device, it makes a little patch of differently colored lights, and based on what that pattern of lights communicates to you, you choose which small patch of pixels to poke at. Now, if you're having trouble perceiving these light patterns or aiming your finger accurately at an arbitrary spot on the screen, this whole interaction breaks down. We can do better. For example, if you can see just fine, but you don't have the fine motor control to manipulate the screen with your finger, there is an accessibility peripheral device that's called a switch. It is a single big button that's the size of like a Frisbee golf disc that allows people who don't have the fine motor control to access their entire touchscreen device with one button. But we aren't going to be using these peripherals today. We're going to be exploring Apple's technology that solves the problem that for many users, this intricate pattern of lights that we spend so much time thinking about and obsessing over and perfecting, this is actually not at all helpful for conveying information to users with visual impairments, or for guiding the user's finger and giving them hints about precisely where to poke at the screen. We are going to practice voiceover. Now, voiceover replaces light with sound for communicating information, and it replaces aiming at and poking at these patches of pixels on your screen with an awesome collection of custom gestures that will allow you to indicate your intentions. Now, something that I love about accessibility support and voiceover is that voiceover allows your fundamental design skills to really shine. You know that your job is more than choosing nice fonts and colors for an app that someone else has already built. You know that, even though some non-designers try to reduce your job to that. But what you do is craft a really excellent user experience from the bones out. VoiceOver strips away everything but those bones. Your design to a user experiencing your app through VoiceOver will be all about context and structure. They will be depending on your taste and discernment to make a flexible and supportive user interface that makes this awesome app do things for these users. This interface that you present to them will have nothing to do with light and everything to do with meaning. And VoiceOver is not something that you have to download specially. VoiceOver ships with every Apple device. For my demo, I was not at all worried about the wireless situation in here because I know that if you have an iPhone, you already have this technology. And I know I sound kind of like an ad for Apple right now, but I am so damn proud that they made this choice. So, this is the one talk where it's not at all rude to be on your phone the whole time, but I realize that I'm basically about to hand you a puppy and then ask you to pay attention to me. So I'm going to do my best to deliberately regather your attention from time to time. It's okay if you want to be like off to the races on your own, but just if that means that you're so excited to play with VoiceOver that you have trouble paying attention with me, that's amazing. But just realize you can play around with this more like over dinner tonight, and I'm going to try to tell you some things that is really awesome, and I really want you to hear it. Okay, are you ready? We're going to turn on VoiceOver. Go into Settings, General, and Accessibility. Now wait. You see how this says VoiceOver at the top? Do not turn this on yet, because as I just explained, VoiceOver completely changes the way that you interact with your device. And so we need to build in an escape hatch before you go in completely changing the way that your device works. So scroll all the way down to the bottom of that accessibility tab. You see where it says accessibility shortcut? This means when you triple click the home button, one of these things will happen. If you already have one of these options selected for accessibility, of course, go ahead and leave that on. If you have something selected that you don't need for accessibility purposes, I recommend that the only one that you choose is VoiceOver. And go ahead with your headphones in or not, just practice triple tapping that home button to go in and out of accessibility mode.
VoiceOver on. Settings. Accessibility shortcut. Accessibility. Back button.
Yeah, and now maybe panic a little. Turn it off.
VoiceOver off.
Whew. So I've actually myself gotten stuck in the notification center when I couldn't figure out how to get out of it, and I forgot that the home button does exactly what you would expect it to do and bring you back to your home screen. So do not be afraid if you get somewhere to just turn off VoiceOver and then interact with your device like the pro that you are. All right. So I'm going to turn this back on myself. Triple tapping is surprisingly hard when your hands are shaking a little. Hi. That's my calendar.
Calendar. Dot.
All
Settings.
right, back in
One
the
new
settings.
item. Double. Settings. Accessibility shortcut. Accessibility. Back button.
Okay, the other caveat that I want to give to you is that if you do something on your phone with VoiceOver on, that also happens in real life. So if you delete something, it's really gone. This is not play mode, which is, again, why this escape hatch is really important. So right now, go ahead and scrub your finger around your screen and notice
Accessibility. Triple selected. Invert color.
that it
Grayscale.
reads things
Zoom.
to you.
Switch. Assistive touch.
And if you want, you can go into your home screen and kind of scrub your finger around there and listen to the things that it says to you. And take a few seconds and play with that. Something else I'd like to point out is that if you run your finger over a section of the screen that doesn't have anything in it, did I turn accessibility off?
VoiceOver off.
Nope. This is a little finicky. Here we go. This is pretty faint, but if in your headphones you should be able to hear. If you run your finger over a section of the screen with nothing in it, there's a bonk. If you have an app that has text in it that's like, drawn into a layer or something fancy like that, and you run your finger over it and you hear this bonk, that means that you've implemented your app wrong. If there's information under your finger, it should be read out loud to you. Okay, let's come back. So you can scrub around. This is great. You can imagine, though, that scrubbing through an entire screen to try to find the elements is not actually a great user experience for your app, especially if you have, say, an iPad and there's one really important button that happens to be small. You can't just hope that the user scrubs their finger around till they find that button. So luckily, VoiceOver really breaks this connection of like the screen as both a thing that gives you information and a screen that takes gestures far apart a little bit. Now, remember earlier we talked about that switch, if you can still see but you can't really aim, that the screen still gives you information but you use the switch to express your intentions. VoiceOver does it a little bit differently. The screen does not give you information that's coming through your headphones. The screen is kind of like an input device, like a keyboard or something that you use to manipulate the output that's coming, that's coming through your headphones. This is easy for me to visualize because like my screen's over there, so I know that the thing that I'm touching here is not necessarily super related to what's under my finger. VoiceOver became easier for me to understand when I made an analogy to another media type that separates the display from the input, like a desktop computer. In a desktop computer, you use the keyboard to manipulate the things on the screen. You are used to using keyboard shortcuts also. You'll tab through elements in a web view. You'll command up and down to scroll all the way into the top and bottom of a really long scroll view. God only knows what you all get up to in Illustrator. You are good with the keyboard shortcuts. With VoiceOver, this device becomes like a gesture shortcut sort of spot. So if you want to tab through elements, the way you do that is with a left and right flick.
Triple click, selected, invert color.
And this needs to be pretty quick. If you run your finger slowly over something, it will still read it to you. But a left and right flick will go through all the elements on the screen in order. And the great thing is that your developers don't really need to do a whole lot of extra work in order to get VoiceOver to read things in order. Here it roughly follows the geographical layout of things on the screen. But you can imagine if you're looking at a whole list of things in your app and you want to read them all, that flicking through them is going to get pretty tedious pretty fast. Luckily, there's another gesture that will let you read all the things on the screen to you. If you, let's say I'm on invert colors. If I two finger swipe down,
invert colors. Grayscale.
It'll start reading everything to me from the focused element. One finger tap will stop that. If you two finger swipe up,
accessibility.
It starts reading from the beginning.
Accessibility shortcut. Heading.
And it'll read over everything in your app. So go ahead and play with navigating your apps in your home screen that way a little bit with this advanced flick and left and right to find all the elements on your screen. I don't think so. I think it just decided I didn't need it anymore. Luckily, this is the voiceover presentation, so it's fine. I love watching people do this. All right, back with me for a minute. So we've solved this problem of knowing what elements are available on the screen. This is great, but this hasn't yet solved the problem of us telling the app what we want it to do. Now, this black box that we've been watching is called the voiceover cursor. We've probably noticed that it's the thing that reads elements to us, but it's also the thing that shows you which element is currently focused. Now, whatever is currently focused by VoiceOver, a one-finger double tap will activate that item. Now, what most sighted users do when they first experience VoiceOver is, this especially happens on the home screen. If you're in here,
productivity folder, 3 apps. Double tap to open.
Double tap to open. Okay. Most sighted users will say, I can aim and double tap on that folder.
Opening
that sounds great.
folder.
I'm good at that.
Productivity. Heading.
The point of
Text field.
VoiceOver is that you never have to aim anything at the screen because you can't see the thing to aim at. Instead,
closing productivity folder.
Anything that is currently highlighted, if you double tap anywhere on the screen,
settings.
That will, if you're good at double tapping backwards,
productivity folder, 3 apps.
That it'll be activated.
Heading. Closing productivity folder. Dock. Settings.
All right.
Settings. Accessibility shortcut. Accessibility.
The keyboard behaves basically like any other button. But you could imagine that if you're scrubbing over your keyboard, you find the character, double tap, find the next character, double tap. That's going to get really annoying really fast. But when people are more used to VoiceOver, they use a different way of indicating, activate that thing that's focused right now. And you do that if you're scrubbing around with one finger.
Grayscale.
You know, this is a multi-touch device. You can tap with another finger anywhere on the screen, and it will activate. It'll activate the thing that is under the first finger. So some people will have with one finger that is always the activate finger, and the other one will kind of go around and explore. Great. One more input gesture, and then we'll play around a little bit. I actually call this the do it gesture. This ends up working just like the space bar in a desktop app. You know how in a lot of desktop apps the main action is toggled by the space bar? If you're watching a movie, it'll play and pause the movie. If you're listening to music, it'll play and pause the music. What do you think it would do in the camera app? Yes, it'll take a photo. So this is the two-finger double tap, and it's called the magic tap. It's amazing. If you have an app that has one main gesture, you can decide what you want the magic tap to do. If your app has one main action, you can decide what the magic tap does. So I would recommend, if you're sharing headphones, first make sure that you're confident in your current music and podcast taste. But go ahead and try that magic gesture, that double finger double tap from the home screen. And just play around with activating some things in your app now that you have learned how to input your choices. All right, I want to bring you back. We have a lot to go through. I know you're really excited. But this is advanced gesture time. So I'd like to try going over these together. So if you don't mind, come back with me to the accessibility options page. Because this is first of all, there's a lot of great options here. And second of all, it's a good place to practice some of these gestures that we've learned. So I'm in the main page for accessibility now.
Back button.
I'll wait a minute for you to catch up if you need. If you need to escape hatch so that you can quickly get in here, no shame. Okay, so I would like to go over these together with you. I think that we can keep it together as we go through things together. If you get excited about something and kind of go off by yourself, that's great, but I'm not coming back for you. So remember, before, when we first built in our escape hatch, it's all the way at the bottom of this page. Now we can get there by swiping, but there's a million items on this page, and that's really annoying. Luckily, scrolling works. With accessibility, you use the 3-finger swipe up and down. We'll go through scrolling in any app.
15 to 21 of 21.
And you hear that bonk at the bottom? Sighted users have the rubber banding to let them know that there's no more, stop trying to scroll. With VoiceOver, you get that little bonk that lets you know that you've reached the end of your content. Maybe if you were playing around on your home screen, you were a little frustrated because you couldn't get to anything but that main screen. 3-finger swipe from side to side will take you through the page controls. This is a standard gesture. Okay, so I'm going to scroll back up to the top. Hello, hello.
Rows 1.
There we go. So in the accessibility folder, this VoiceOver option, I'd like us to go in there together to practice some gestures. So I'm going to double tap to activate.
VoiceOver.
All right.
Accessibility. Back
If
button.
you manage to blow up your escape hatch by accident,
VoiceOver.
this is
On.
where you can turn VoiceOver
Double tap
on
to
and
toggle
off again
setting.
later. I'd like to go down to just
VoiceOver
highlight
practice
this VoiceOver
button.
practice button. Don't go into it just yet, but you hear what it
VoiceOver
says?
practice. Button.
VoiceOver practice button. It's saying more words than are actually written on the screen because for sighted users, we use things like tint color and maybe borders around the button to say this is something that you can interact with. That is not useful to users with VoiceOver who are using VoiceOver. So it tells
VoiceOver
you
practice. Button.
it's a button. That means you can double tap and it'll do something. I really recommend going into VoiceOver practice later because this is a spot where you can try every single gesture that you can think of and it'll just tell you what it does and you won't have to worry about doing terrible things to your phone. Most VoiceOver gestures use a different number of fingers and a different number of taps. That's why there's like the 2-finger double tap and the 3-finger swipe. There's a 4-fingered single tap close to the top of the screen, all kinds of things like that. Just try everything you can think of later. Right now, I'd like you to highlight that speaking rate
50%.
slider.
Adjustable. Swipe up or down with 1 finger to adjust the value.
Yeah, it tells you that it's adjustable and then says swipe up or down with 1 finger to adjust the value. Go ahead and do
60%,
that.
70%, 80%, 90%, 100%, 90%, 80%, 70%,
And notice
60%,
that
70%,
you don't
80%,
need to look at your
90%,
screen
100%,
at
90%,
all
80%,
to
70%,
understand the effects of your actions. You don't have to aim.
60%, 50%,
You can
40%,
just
50%.
go ahead and pick the speed of VoiceOver that you're the most comfortable with. And realize, though, that people who use VoiceOver all the time, you had better believe that they've got this cranked all the way up to 100%. So,
Speak hints. On. Speaking rate. 50%.
hints.
Adjustable.
Hints are this thing.
Swipe up or down with 1 finger to adjust the value.
Swipe up or down with 1 finger to adjust the value. People who use VoiceOver all the time know what you're supposed to do to adjust the value of things that it just told you are adjustable. Swiping up or down with 1 finger is really common. They don't need that. Some people would prefer not to hear that all the time. They can turn off hints globally. This means that if in your app you implement accessibility hints because you think your user interface is a little confusing and you're going to use the hints to make sure the users know how to do it, yeah, that will sometimes not work because users have the choice to turn off hints. These next couple options I want to tell you about just because this will change the way that you hear VoiceOver. If I pitch change, if I go back,
back button. Accessibility. VoiceOver.
You hear how it said accessibility in a lower tone, and then VoiceOver on in kind of a medium tone. I'll go back again, and you can go back and forth and listen again.
VoiceOver. Accessibility. Back button.
It's important that it has a different pitch for the thing that's focused from the thing that's not focused because if the voiceover was, the lower pitched voiceover was the name of the whole page. The medium pitch is the thing that is focused right now, and knowing what's focused is really important because it means if you double tap, that thing's going to happen. So I definitely want to know what has the voiceover, what has the voiceover focus. Another spot where pitch change is really cool is in typing. If you type, as you're running your finger around the keyboard, the thing that's under your finger that's focused will have a medium pitch. Once you activate it, once you type it, that will be said in a higher pitch. If you delete a character, it'll be said in a lower pitch. So you always know what's going on. It's wonderful.
VoiceOver.
The other one.
Speak hints. Use pitch change. On. Use sound effects.
Sound effects.
On.
You might not have even
Double tap
noticed
to toggle
this.
setting.
But especially if you're still, like, you might be using VoiceOver right now, but you're still looking at your device with your eyeballs to use this pattern of lights to help you decide what to do. I'm going to start this reading everything on the
Accessibility.
screen.
Back button. VoiceOver. Heading. VoiceOver.
You hear that
on.
click
VoiceOver
as it
speaks items on the
moves
screen.
from item to
Tap
item?
once to select an item.
This is a great
Double tap to
signal
activate the
that,
selected item.
that it
VoiceOver
has
practice.
that it's
Button.
not that it's not just reading a whole list of things, that these are separate elements on the screen. A slightly more subtle but important sound effect. Remember how you can find items just by scrubbing your finger around the screen? You'll get a geographic sense of where things are in the layout. You'll know, okay, when I'm in this app on this screen, this button in the top right corner does this thing. Great. But
Accessibility.
listen, see
Back
if
button.
you hear this like double tone when I hit the back button. Ta-da. Let's go. Ba-doop. You hear that
Accessibility.
little like ba-doop?
General. Back button.
I'll go back again.
VoiceOver. On. Button.
Ba-doop.
VoiceOver.
That
Accessibility.
means
Back button.
the entire screen has changed. That stuff that you thought you knew about where things were laid out is not true anymore. So you used to know what that button in the top right corner did, but now, before just going and activating it really fast, double check what's there. It is probably something different. Now, these sounds, they're like button press states or like navigation animations. They reassure you that the app is responding to you, or they draw your attention to the fact that something has changed. But accessibility is a place where Apple gives users a really unparalleled amount of customization over the entire device experience, so you can turn all of these off. This is not per app. This is saying I never want to hear hints or sound effects ever again. All right, speaking of customization, I am going to show you a secret menu that exists in every screen of every app, including all of yours. Remember how earlier we used the one-finger swipe up and down to adjust the value of the speaking rate?
50%. Double tap to activate the selected item.
Swiping your finger up and down does completely different things depending on context. And you can actually choose what the swipe up and down gesture does depending what you want. You access this secret menu that decides what the up and down gesture does with a two-finger twist.
Characters. Words.
This is the rotor.
Speech rate. Words.
Uh-huh.
Characters.
Let's say that I have just heard someone's name, or
Words.
it's read out loud from VoiceOver.
Characters.
And I'm like, wait, what was that name? I didn't really catch it. Now, as I swipe down,
Space. Space. Capital D. O. U. B.
B, was that B
Bravo.
or D? Oh, bravo, great. This is so cool. And you can
Headings.
also, from
Containers.
here,
Speech
maybe you're
rate.
in an app that you're not familiar with. If you want to turn the speech rate down, you can do that from here too.
6, 7, 80, 80,
I can change my speech rate from
80%.
anywhere. In different contexts, you can add different options will show up here. If you're editing text, different things will show up. And in the accessibility controls, you can choose what items show up in your rotor setting and which don't. Another one of my favorite accessibility shortcuts, I call it the two-finger Zorro. Officially, it's the accessibility escape gesture, where with two fingers you make a Z, and it'll kind of scrub you out. Sometimes it'll pop you back up a level of the navigation stack. If there's a popover, that'll dismiss it. You know how, like, usually with a popover, you have to aim outside of it to dismiss it. That's not a thing in VoiceOver. The accessibility escape gesture will get you out. It's fine. I know. Escape. All right, you might be wondering how hard this is going to be to adopt in your apps, because it seems like a lot of really custom, really specialized behavior. But the great news is, you may have already won. No, like, really, your app might just work, because Apple makes huge efforts to make sure that its out-of-the-box UI elements work pretty darn well with accessibility. And the more of them you use, the more your app will gain accessibility features for free. The more custom stuff you do, though, the more effort is required to make sure that VoiceOver does something really reasonable. In our app, for example, we wanted to alert users when they had lost their internet connection. So we made a bright orange banner that animates on screen and says, "You've lost your internet connection, we'll show you more content when it returns." And then when you have internet again, it animates back off screen. Sadly, bright orange and animating are not useful ways to grab the attention of somebody who's using VoiceOver. So now we have to make a decision. What does VoiceOver do when it comes on screen? It should probably read something. Should it take you out of where you were before and enforce some kind of acknowledgement before it lets you go about what you were doing? What happens when it dismisses? These are more decisions that you're going to have to make as you implement custom UI. We're ready for the final exam. Okay, I'm going to need you to stay with me for the setup and instructions, or you're going to have probably a hard time. Okay, so go ahead and go back to your home screen.
Double tap to open.
Select something in the settings
9:41
bar.
a.m. Status bar item.
It's been 9:41.
Swipe down with 3 fingers to reveal the notification center. Swipe up with 3 fingers to reveal the control center. Double tap to scroll to top.
Okay, when you've selected something in the status bar, it'll tell you how to bring up the control center. This only works if something in the status bar is selected, and it's a 3-finger swipe up when something in the status bar is selected. Go ahead and do that. Now wait, don't get excited yet. Don't touch anything.
Double tap to toggle settings.
We're gonna enter hard mode here. So look at the camera icon, just look at it. You have learned to navigate without looking at patterns of lights, right? We're gonna do it for real. 3 fingers, triple tap your screen.
Screen curtain on.
We didn't need those lights. Now, if you accidentally did a double tap instead of a triple tap, you toggled the voice part of VoiceOver. It's not going to talk to you anymore, even though it's still running in VoiceOver mode. It is something if you're like inputting a password or something and you don't want it to say out loud. Okay, you still have your control center up. It didn't go away just because your screen's off. You know where the camera icon is, right? Yeah? I want you to open up the camera, and I want you to take a selfie. This is my favorite thing. I am definitely running over time, so I'm going to have to stop with this. If you haven't managed to find your moment of surprise and delight with the camera app yet, you must try this later because it is the most wonderful thing. All right. In conclusion, for sighted people, learning VoiceOver feels like learning something really super cool that your device can do, right? Like, you can use it if you're driving and you have a podcast app and you want to skip the podcast forward 15 seconds without actually looking. You can use this if you're in a dark airplane and you want to catch up on Twitter without lighting up the whole cabin with your phone's bright screen. You can bring it out as a cool party trick, like, look what your phone can do, you didn't even know. But for blind users who depend on VoiceOver, this is not a cool thing your phone can do. It is not an exaggeration to call this a life-changing technology. And you are absolutely up to the challenge of supporting it, and I'm really excited to see where you take this. Thank you.